Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sunday Morning Live. I'm your host, Aaron Tomlinson. I want to thank you for watching, whatever time you're watching, if you're watching by replay or if you join me live. And I'll welcome you to the discussion. Today, I'm going to talk about reimagining spiritual gifts. And it's going to be an interesting discussion, interesting topic to cover. So without any further ado, let me just check some things. So I guess that is further ado. But let me check some things. Let me see if I can see any comments. Let me just make sure I'm streaming in all the right places. Hope everybody's doing well. It's the Sunday after Thanksgiving 2025. I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. And again, I'm not showing that I'm streaming. So just give me 1 second. Well, hopefully this is going out. It shows me live on Facebook, but when I go to my own page, I don't see it, but it does look like some people are jumping on. Maybe that's just from YouTube. But anyway, I don't want to hold things up. I want to jump right into the topic. So I want to start this out on a personal level, and then we'll get into spiritual gifts, what they are. Are they exclusively the property of the Christian religion? Because I had decided a couple of weeks ago that I was going to start talking about this. I think I'll probably end up doing a bit of a series on spiritual gifts. And so it was a topic that was already on my mind to talk about. So I, went into YouTube, did some Google searches, looked on Amazon just to see if what's out there about spiritual gifts. And almost 100%, I think I can say 100% of what I found using the term spiritual gifts in my searches was exclusively presented by Christians and using the Bible, particularly sections of Paul the Apostle's writings in Romans chapter 12, 1 Corinthians 12, 13, and 14, Ephesians chapter 4, to talk about spiritual gifts. And there was a lot of stuff on discovering your spiritual gifts. And depending on the perspective that the person writing the book or talking about this stuff was coming from, there was a lot of talk about spiritual gifts that really is just talking about talent or temperament. So for example, in 1 Corinthians 12, Paul gives a list of gifts in not 1 Corinthians 12, Romans 12. He gives a list of gifts that are very natural to everybody. Giving, for example, or showing mercy, or hospitality. And so for those segments of Christianity in America today and around the world that are essentially materialist, they don't believe in any kind of supernatural manifestations, things like healings, things like miracles, things like prophecies or visions. And so they almost focus exclusively on what I would call talents. And before we're done, I want to show you that in 1 Corinthians 12, 13, and 14, at least, when we're talking about spiritual gifts, we're not talking about something that is relegated to that which is common among people. Things like, again, hospitality, giving, stuff like that. So I just thought it was interesting. Now, you can find the same phenomena discussed outside of a Christian context if you put in different terms. For example, a lot of what charismatic Christians would term spiritual gifts from, again, a list in 1 Corinthians 12, things like prophecy, words of knowledge, words of wisdom, stuff like that, generally tends to be labeled as psychic abilities in our culture. And maybe it's my Christian background, I don't know, but using the term psychic to describe some of these things for me is a little bit um, of a challenge. I'll just put it that way. It's a little bit of a challenge. And I like the term spiritual gifts. So I wanted to know, is it possible to think about these things, use the word or the term spiritual gifts to describe them, and not be beholden to any particular group or religion or doctrine? So I was thinking about these things, been thinking about these things, had been planning this, like I said, for at least a couple of weeks, definitely within the last week. And then something very interesting happened to me over the weekend. We had a great Thanksgiving, had the opportunity to spend it with some members of my family that we don't get to see that often. And we just thoroughly enjoyed ourselves on Thursday. And then over the weekend, my family and I had a situation, a challenge that presented itself to us. Just a horrible day. And honestly, this is not hyperbole. Probably one of the worst days of my life, for real. And if you've followed me for any time at all, you know that I've had significant challenges just in the last 3 or 4, 10 years and throughout my life. So for me to say this was one of the worst days of my life, definitely top 5, and in that top 5, it would be in the top 3, probably. So really, really, really difficult, challenging situation, really difficult day. Not going to discuss the details of it, but just suffice it to say it was bad. And as we're going through this situation on Friday, I just have to say I was really proud of myself for the resiliency that I showed. But even more importantly, I was really proud of the members of my immediate family and the resiliency that they showed in stepping up to the challenge. So I want to say that first of all. The second thing that I want to say is that as I was going through this difficult situation, I found myself reaching out for spiritual assistance, for supernatural help, praying, um, almost from a place of desperation. And some things came back to me that have been discussed or presented to me in the last year by certain people who have deconstructed, who have excluded maybe not the reality of the spiritual world, but definitely excluded any concepts of relationship with a higher power, relationship with God, with spirit, with spirit guides or angels or ancestors, or whatever the case may be. And I don't really understand that. I don't understand that bent that people have. It doesn't really make sense to me. And have consistently, even as I've walked through this deconstruction process, if you've followed me anytime at all, I've consistently affirmed my belief in God, my belief in spirit, my belief in the spiritual world and in higher power. But within the last, since last summer, there's been a really harsh criticisms that have been leveled against people who are going through difficult times, who may be looking to God or a higher power as some kind of fantasy, some kind of phantasm, some kind of split off part of oneself that they're making up in their mind. They're all just egregores, just creations of the mind, things that humanity has done, basically some kind of mind trickery. But what I think is cruel and even worse than that, and I'm especially firm on this after going through this situation, is the idea that it's just a crutch or that it's just some kind of security blanket. And I found myself as I was in this situation and I was, crying out for assistance. Um, I found myself wondering, am I just using a crutch? Am I just needing a security blanket right now? And I asked myself that question, and as I did, something just rose up inside of me, just a very clear and strong no, because it's only a crutch and it's only a security blanket if it's not substantially real and substantially effectual in bringing help and assistance from above, from the spirit world, in a way that is helpful and powerful and really delivering the goods in the middle of that situation or those types of situations. Whether it is what we would call traditionally an answer to prayer, meaning the situation turns itself around, there's some kind of intervention that changes the trajectory of the situation in the way that we would think of answered prayer, or whether it's just strength and comfort as you're going through something. That strength and that comfort can be very, very real. And I find it very arrogant. I find it very cruel for people to use terms like security blanket, use terms like a crutch in a situation, and to demean people and shame people when they're going through something very, very difficult. And when this stuff was being presented last summer, I had a very strong reaction that some people found offensive, that some people took offense to in my life. Some people blocked me on social media, cut me out of relationship because I was critical of that kind of thinking, because I find it cruel. Having gone through one of the most difficult days of my life, I am even firmer on that. So I don't want this to be negative or against something someone else had said. What I want to do is encourage you out there that this stuff is real and this stuff really works. Now, Aaron, what does this have to do with spiritual gifts? Because, and we'll see this in a little bit, but spiritual gifts, essentially, the way I'm using the term, involves any tangible, substantial assistance that a person receives in their lives from that realm and from that dimension that comes as a gift to empower them, to sustain them, to comfort them, and to even turn the trajectory of the situation. So I think it's really important that we understand these things. Now, yes, it was a very, very difficult day on Friday. Yesterday, there was something that I experienced that was so remarkable, so unexplainable, and so evidential of assistance that me and my family needed, that we received from higher dimensions, that any doubts, any shadow of a doubt, any thing that anyone else says that's a naysayer about this stuff, that's cynical about this stuff, that holds a different view and different opinion, whether it's the mockery that comes with it. In other words, by mockery, what I mean is people that just mock people who engage in that way with a higher power, with God, with spirit guides, with angels, with ancestors, with spirit animals. There's a certain element of mockery that comes in our culture. Whether it's just, and that mockery can be very powerful. It can be very shame-inducing. It can cause you to question yourself, not just the experience, but to question yourself. Am I gullible? Am I such a weak person that I need a security blanket or I need a crutch? I really wish more people would have called this person out. Some of you know who I'm talking about. I really wish more people would have called that out as bullshit. But nevertheless, so there's the mockery element of it. And then there's the people, the philosophical, intellectual arguments of, say, scientific materialism that can be formidable. They're worth engaging. They're well thought out. They're intellectually honest. There's a level of intellectual integrity, and it's not being presented in a shaming or mocking or scoffing sort of way, but being presented in a formidable, argumentative sort of way, or an antithesis to the thesis of the existence of a spiritual world. And so those things can rattle you as well. So you can be rattled emotionally by the mockery that comes, or you can be rattled intellectually by the contrary arguments that come, that can create doubt and cause us to question, like I was in the midst of that situation, like I'm crying out for help here. Am I just a weak person? See, that's the danger of that kind of teaching. It's really dangerous. It's really It really, really is for people who are open. And most of our culture, most of our society is open. Very, very, very small portion of our society that's not open to magic or not open to spiritual presence or God, belief in God, or relating to a higher power. So when people say that's just a crutch, that's a security blanket, they're talking about our entire culture practically, except for a very small portion of people. So I don't appreciate that. But again, I want to make this positive. So I want to encourage you. So Saturday, something happened, and I can't tell you what it was, at least not right now, that completely dispelled all of that and gave me not only me and my family, not only the help that we needed, but the comfort and the assurance that we were not alone, that we were receiving an answer to the prayers that I had prayed. And it was so incredible that it's beyond question for me because there was a physical, evidential manifestation. I'm not just talking about a coincidence. I'm not just talking about synchronicity. I'm not talking about anything that could be created. So these people say, well, Jesus, angels, spirit guides, whatever, they're just figments of your imagination. You're just relating to dissociated parts of yourself and whatever the case may be. There's no way any level of emotional manipulation, hypnosis, mind power, mind over matter could have created this particular sign from above that I received that is quite literally a tangible manifestation. Like I don't even know what to compare it to. In other words, I have the physical evidence of it, and I have the proof of it. Now, Aaron, why aren't you talking about? Why aren't you going to give us? Why aren't you going to let us in on the secret? Two reasons. The first reason is that it's very personal to me, and that's enough reason right there. But the second reason is, and this one may be more important, if I share these things publicly, if I share it publicly, I will be subject to ridicule and doubt because it's so phenomenal. Even people close to me, when I told them about it, they couldn't quite wrap their mind around what I had experienced, what was happening. And so, quite frankly, 90% of the public, maybe, I don't know. This is my thought. I could be completely off on this. Most people wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't believe it. You think I'm making it up. Would actually not give me credibility. It would cause me to lose credibility. But suffice it to say, for me, for my truth, my perspective on things, it settled the issue once and for all for me. Not only about the existence of a spiritual realm, not only that spiritual realm is populated, not only about the existence of a God, but that I'm on the right path for me. Completely settled the issue and the question in my heart. And so I thought it was interesting because what happened would not have fit any biblical definition at all for a spiritual gift. It would not fit anything really. In fact, I had heard a few people, one or two times in my life, who experienced something similar to this. And even I was completely skeptical of it. Completely skeptical. I just dismissed them out of hand, those claims. Now I'm not so sure. Now that I've experienced it myself, I have to go back and rethink that stuff. So I just want to help you. Yes, the spirit world is real. Yes, the Spirit of God is real. Yes, we have a spiritual team of angels, spirit guides, animal spirits, and ancestors that are supporting us in our lives. And it seems to be that the more open we are to that, the more we develop a relationship with that, with those things, the more we cultivate relationship with those things, the more likely we are to get that intervention help. I don't know if that has to do with free will. I don't know if, I've heard people say, well, you have to ask for it in order to receive it. But yet I've had too many times in my life and known too many people who weren't open to it. And it was that help was given to them anyway. And in fact, it was the results of those things that made them open to it in the first place. So I'm not sure that that's the case. But I do know that the more you develop a reciprocal relationship with spirit, the more you can experience these kinds of things. There's nothing special about me. The only thing special about me is that I've spent 30 years cultivating that relationship with openness, yes, with questioning, yes, with doubts, yes, with taking serious intellectual arguments and stuff like that. But I have cultivated that kind of relationship. And so what I mean is we tend to think that divine intervention or help from above is just going to happen without any participation, the right kind of participation on our part. And this leaves people disillusioned. It strengthens and empowers the confirmation bias that people have against this kind of stuff, et cetera, and so on. So enough about that. Let's jump into spiritual gifts. So spiritual gifts is a term that's used by Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. And I'm not sure if I want to start there. Let's just suffice it to say the phrase spiritual gifts comes from the Bible. So the idea is more or less, as I said, dominated by the Christian church. But by no means is the phenomena itself, and I really want you to hear that. I really want you to get that in your thinking. The phenomena being described that we'll look at in the Bible is by no means the exclusive experience or property of the Bible or of Christianity. In fact, it's quite ubiquitous throughout history. So we might start, for example, with the Hindu religion and the sutras and the Vedic scriptures, which are some of the oldest, if not the oldest, sacred writings that humanity still possesses today. And in that culture, they talk about cities, not cities like New York and Paris, Siddhis, Sidhis, Siddhis. And cities are their term for describing supernatural powers. Things like the ability to levitate, things like the ability to read minds, the ability to heal, the ability to manifest items or things, almost like a stage magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, but there's no trickery and no deception and no illusion to it. These are some of the cities that are mentioned. But the interesting thing is that for Hindus, cities are a byproduct. In other words, it's not just about acquiring supernatural power or seeking these things for the wonder of it or as proof that those things exist, but they are the byproduct of a state of spiritual advancement and enlightenment that a yogi might receive. It's the byproduct of the yogi's journey towards self-realization and liberation. And as they're engaging in that process, which is the goal itself, the siddhis or the gifts or is never the goal itself. It's spiritual development. And when a person gets to a certain level of spiritual development, then these things start to operate. And if you want to read miracles that are even as mind-blowing as miracles in the New Testament or more so, you can find accounts from ancient yogis and the accounts to modern yogis and accounts of things that they can do. In Buddhism, I forget what they're called. I looked it up. I thought I would remember it. I didn't write it down. But Buddhism also describes these things, and they have their own lists. So in the Hindu culture, there's lists of siddhis. In the Bible, there's lists of spiritual gifts. In Buddhism, there's a list of the spiritual gifts, and some of these include things like shape-shifting, the ability to change form. We think about shape-shifting usually in terms of indigenous peoples or magic, or sometimes even the occult or black magic, the ability to transform into an animal, for example, shape shifting, telepathy, the ability to communicate through the mind and read the thoughts of another. Also, within Buddhism, there's this idea of all seeing and all knowing. So there's almost this omniscience. There's the ability to recall everything about all of your past lives. All of that stuff would be considered spiritual gifts that, again, are the byproduct of the cultivation of spirit, the cultivation of the divine spark within humanity. So we find it in Hinduism, we find it in Buddhism. What about Islam? In Islam, karama, I think I'm saying that right, Karama, is their list of spiritual gifts, particularly for Sufis or the mystical stream of Islam. And they talk about things like prophecy, healing, miracles, kind of staying within the same framework as Christian thought. And then, of course, there's the shamans of ancient cultures and their magical powers to heal, their ability to see into the spirit world, relate with the spirit world, their ability to see the future, their ability to assist with hunts so that the tribes could get food, or assist with, things like rain dances and stuff like that so they can grow crops. And then, of course, today in metaphysical circles, more New Age circles, and I want to be clear, when I use the term New Age, I'm not using it disparagingly. That's kind of become a disparaging comment, and I am not at all. I appreciate everything that's in that and covered by that realm, though it is a broad term that's overused and misunderstood. But you have things like fortune telling, divination, energy work, Reiki, channeling would be an example of spiritual gifts. So my point is, this is a phenomenon. What we're going to look at from the Bible is simply a description of phenomena that people have experienced coming from all different beliefs and all different approaches in terms of even their cosmologies, what they believe about the world, what they believe about the spiritual world, and what they believe as far as the doctrines and morals and things that they subscribe to. We also find it in ancient history. And we'll look at that because we're going to look at what Paul's saying. I think we misunderstand it because we read it in a 20th or 21st century lens rather than a first century Greco-Roman lens. And you get something totally different when you look at what we're going to look at when you look at it in its cultural context. But the interesting thing is that as these phenomenon have been examined by anthropologists or by scholars of religion, they find 5 common traits that run through all of this. It runs through Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, shamanic traditions, and of course, Christianity. Here's the 5 things. The first thing is, in all of these traditions, these are gifts that come from a divine or transcendent force, listen to this, rather than being self-generated. So there's all this talk about we're God, we're one with God, we are source. We hear a lot about that in spiritual circles. And that can leave one with the impression that you're sort of at the, I don't know how else to say it. You're like king of the hill, top of the food chain, king of the mountain, sitting on the throne as God, and that you can self-generate these things. Now, while I do believe that there are abilities that we have as divine humans, there are things that exist within our divine potentiality that can be cultivated and that can manifest seemingly supernatural stuff. That would be distinguished from spiritual gifts. Spiritual gifts across all these traditions, and the way I'm using the term, is not self-generated. It's not coming from you. It's coming from beyond you. It's coming from a divine source. It's coming from spirit. It's coming from spirit guides, angels, ancestors, all the stuff that I've labeled. It's coming from that realm. It's not something that you're doing. It's not something that you're self-generating. It comes out of this relationship that gets cultivated. The second thing is, across all these traditions, is that they are there to serve and for a specific purpose that is never self-aggrandizing. So in other words, examples of self-aggrandizement would be We see this a lot in the history of revivals in Christianity. A. Allen was a healing evangelist, and they would introduce him as God's man of faith and power. I think there's an element of aggrandizement to that. Ego boost. I'm better than everybody else because look what I can do, kind of thing. Using it to draw money to yourself, using it to draw influence, control, all of that kind of stuff. So that's addressed in all of these ancient writings and traditions. The third thing is, and this is really important, it appears to come from preparation, from engaging in certain disciplines, from making spiritual progress, or going through an initiation. In the case of a true shaman, a true indigenous shaman, they will go through an initiation that usually starts very, very early in their life. The magical orders of the 20th century, things like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Thelema, Aleister Crowley's or magical order that he established, Servants of the Light that was established by Dion Fortune. These all required certain initiations, secret initiations. And as you went through these secret initiations, then the realm of spiritual gifts would open up for you. So the third thing, preparation. It was the Sufis, those that had chosen a mystical path that had the powers within Islam that are talked about there. Within Hinduism, it's the yogis. Within Buddhism, it's the bodhisattvas. I apologize to all my Buddhist watchers. I'm not as conversant or fluent with Buddhism at all. It's a shaman within shamanic traditions. So there's a level of preparation, discipline, spiritual progress, initiation, etc. This is why when going through a difficult situation, it's not always helpful to just, and there's nothing wrong with this. It's perfectly appropriate when you're going through a difficult situation to post on Facebook, please send prayers for this situation. Please send positive thoughts, positive energy, good energy, whatever the case may be. And I think there is an effect to that. And I think there is a power to that. But finding people who are initiated, whether it's through formal initiation or just the initiation of life, because some of us are called to this type of public service for people. Finding people like that is next level effective. And so that's usually what I choose to do in those types of situations. The fourth thing that they have in common is caution about them. In other words, these things you can become attached to the phenomena itself. It can become addicting. We definitely saw this in our church. There was a season of just incredible signs and wonders, manifestations, and pretty soon people they got bored with when certain manifestations would happen. It's like, oh my God, this is real. Kind of like I was talking about. This settles the question. This is beyond anything that could be just generated through deceit or manipulation or mind trick. But then the more frequent those types of manifestations became for us, the more they were taken for granted, and people were looking for the next thing, the next big thing. They wanted to be odd, not ODD, which you are odd when you talk about this stuff, and because it's so rare in our culture, and the dominant spirit of the age and influence of the age is scientific materialism and secularism, secular humanism. So it's not just odd, ODD, but they want to be odd, AWED. I want the next awesome thing. And then when some of the stuff stopped, because there was an addiction to it. There was an attachment to it that was impeding spiritual growth and spiritual progress. And then people got mad. They got mad at me. Why aren't we experiencing the things? But why aren't you operating in gifts of spirit like you used to operate in? Really, literally got mad at me. Anyway. So that's also in there, not becoming attached or addicted to these things. And then the fifth thing is there's a diversity. There's a broad range of this stuff. So having kind of laid that foundation, let's look at what Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. And I'm doing this not because it's in the Bible, but because, and I want to be clear here, Paul's talking about a phenomenon. And when we understand the phenomena and we go back and we read what Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, then we can have an accessible framework for understanding what these things are that I just laid out and how they work within the Christian context, the biblical context. But not just that, when we understand it's not the exclusive property, that Paul's describing phenomena that were common to his day. And he says one of the most bizarre passages in the entire Bible is right here in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. Now, for those of you that don't know or don't come from a Christian background, Paul is writing a letter to a church that he was overseeing in Corinth because there were all kinds of strange things that were happening in Corinth and he couldn't be physically present. So he writes a letter to address these things. And this is bizarre. Start reading in 1 Corinthians 12. He says, now concerning spiritual gifts, I do not want you to be ignorant. You know that you were Gentiles, carried away to these dumb idols, however you were led. So in other words, he's acknowledging this is a phenomenon that you experienced among the Gentiles. And because you experienced it among the Gentiles, there's these abuses. But listen to what he had to clarify here. Verse 3 says, therefore I make it known to you that no one speaking by the Spirit of God calls Jesus accursed. And no one can say that Jesus is Lord except by the Holy Spirit. Interesting, huh? Then he says, there's diversity of gifts, but the same Spirit. There are diversities of ministrations, but the same Lord. Diversities of activities, but it is all the same God who works all in all. Verse 7 I want to look at, but the manifestation of the Spirit is given to each one for the profit of all. For to one is given the word of wisdom through the Spirit, to another the word of knowledge through the Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healings by the same Spirit, to another working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another discerning different kinds of spirits, to another speaking in different kinds of tongues, to another interpreting those tongues. But it is the same Spirit that works all these, distributing to each one individually as he wills. All right. We have got a problem in the beginning because in verse 1, Paul says, now concerning spiritual gifts, I do not want you to be ignorant. Now, if you have a Bible that was at least honest in the translation, the word gifts there is going to show up in the italics. And that means it's not in the original text. It was added at the discretion of the translators. The Greek word that he uses is pneumatikos. Pneumatikos. Pneuma is the Greek word for spirit. Pneumatikos is about things that are related to the Spirit, but not gifts, people. And it's amazing that it gets translated this way because Paul uses this term pneumatikos almost exclusively in this letter to Corinth to describe two types of followers of Christ in that first century church in Corinth. There were those that he called sarkikos, or relating to the body, or relating to the physical realm. It gets translated as carnal, but again, that's a misunderstood term in modern Christianity. It's a term that references people that have no responsiveness, no relationship, no openness to the Spirit. They have doctrine, they have belief, they have faith, they're part of the community, but they're underdeveloped, if you will. Hold on one second. I gotta deal with my dog. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. The pneumatikos were people. It wasn't gifts. It wasn't things. It's people. It were people that were spiritually developed. And this was common this is the way the term is used in the Greco-Roman culture. It's talking about the spiritually advanced. So pneumatikos is used for Homer, as example, uses it. Or in Stoic philosophy, this term pneumatikos would describe someone who was permeated by or characterized by or responsive to this cosmic divine force of spirit that gives the universe its cohesion and its rationality. In other words, they were responsive to spirit. So Paul's not saying concerning spiritual gifts, I don't want you to be ignorant. He's saying concerning those who operate and are responsive and are what he called earlier in the text, spiritually mature, I don't want you to be ignorant about what's happening with them. So this goes back to preparation, discipline, spiritual progress, initiation, etc. So oftentimes we don't get this kind of help and this kind of assistance from above because we believe things like it's not out there, or it just kind of happens willy-nilly, or we're not taught, we're not learned in how to develop a responsiveness. We're not taught, we're not learned. We don't have the discipline to cultivate a relationship with spirit where there's reciprocal things that are happening. And this is what opens the door to these things. So it's not just I prayed and God dropped it out of the sky kind of stuff. You see what I'm saying? And so we have this idea of spiritual gifts in the charismatic world, that the Spirit just showed up. Spirit could use anybody. He could use a donkey. Well, sure, of course, because there's a verse in the Bible, story in the Bible, where a donkey speaks to a prophet. And so we would love to say that, when but the truth is, what Paul's talking about here is he's talking about the spiritually initiated, the spiritually developed. He's talking about a group of people in Corinth. Go back and read the first 3 chapters and you'll get an idea. Every time he talks about spiritual, the word spiritual there is the word pneumatikos. It's talking about a people within the church of Corinth, not talking about things. All right. Now, he does use the word gifts later. And the word that he uses is charisma in the Greek. It's where we get the word charismatic. The word charisma in the Greek language means a favor. This is important. A favor from the divine, a divine gift. But it's a term in ancient Greco culture to describe a reciprocal relationship, particularly used and important within the society, within the way the society was structured, between a patron and a client. The patron would bestow wealth, would bestow gifts, would bestow favor upon a client in return for some acts of service. This is the context of it. So people who are spiritually gifted, in the context, have a responsibility to use that in a way that provides service to others who aren't as developed or who aren't as initiated, etc., and so on. So that's the term charisma. In particular, when Paul's audience would hear the term charisma, they didn't just hear a free gift with no strings attached. They heard about a concept they were very familiar with, where relational obligations were created. And the last thing I want to get to is in verse where is it? 11. But one and same Spirit works all these things. No, sorry. Where is it? Oh, verse 7. The manifestation of the Spirit is given to each one for the profit of all. What is the word manifestation? What is the word manifestation in this context? The word manifestation in this context is the Greek word phanero. And let me see if I wrote this down. It means to uncover, phaneros. It means to uncover, to lay bare, to shine through, or an exhibition. This is what I experienced on Saturday. It's when there is something that manifests in this physical world that completely defies any laws of physics, particularly if we're stuck in Newtonian physics or even quantum physics to some degree. It is a valid proof. It is evidential. It is a manifestation of the Spirit. It's physical, tangible proof that realm exists. And there it is. And what's interesting to me is that, again, in the book of First Corinthians, Paul the apostle says, look, I didn't come to you in First Corinthians chapter 2. He says, I didn't come to you with wise arguments. I didn't come to you with the best argument. I didn't come to you with a new philosophy. You didn't believe because I persuaded you through apologetics. Apologetics is a term that means, here's why you should believe that we have the truth, right? He said, I didn't come with any of that. He said, I came with the demonstration of the Spirit and power that your faith that your faith in God might not rest on the wisdom of men, but on the power of the Spirit. And that is incredibly absent today. Even places that talk about it just talk about it. They don't see it. It's not manifested. They talk about healing, but they don't operate in healing. They talk about blessing, but they don't experience the manifestation of blessing. Because again, if we just have a philosophy, it won't deliver the goods. It won't deliver that kind of intervention. If we just, throw out a prayer, I don't want to say, again, I'm not trying to be demeaning. I'm trying to be clarifying. I was doing that. I was just throwing out a prayer. I mean, it was snarky. On Saturday, I was snarky about it. I was like, well, could use some help down here, kind of thing. So I'm not, but what I am saying is that there's a participatory level. Later on, Paul goes on and he says, the Spirit distributes all of these workings, all of these manifestations to each one as he wills. Terrible, 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 terrible translation. There's a Greek scholar out there that is an authority for all the commentaries that I've been looking at. And I think his first name is Martin, but I may have that wrong. But his last name is Trench. They usually cite it as Trench says, Trench. He was a brilliant scholar in the ancient Greek language. And he translates this totally differently. He says the Spirit distributes it to each one according to the person, according to their openness and responsiveness, according to their temperament. Last week, if you watched last week, I talked about the various clairs, not ladies, but clairs, like it's a French term, just means clear. Clairvoyance, the ability to see in the Spirit. Clairaudience, the ability to hear from the Spirit. Claircognizance, this is what people refer to as downloads. They just get an impartation, a download of understanding, a download of wisdom, a download of knowledge. That's claircognizance. It's happening in the mind. Clairsentience, this is feeling stuff, experiencing things at a feeling level. In our culture today, we talk about empaths and stuff like that. So what it's saying, when the Spirit distributes to each one as he wills, it's saying the Spirit works within the pneumatikos, works within those that are spiritually responsive, according to their makeup and according to their personality and according to their own intention and will. So for whatever reason, and I don't know all the answers to why this is, but for whatever reason, these things, though they are real, though they are powerful, and though they are available to everyone, there is an aspect of reciprocal relationship and development and alignment and openness that allows us to experience these things on an ongoing basis. Now, that might be discouraging, and I don't want it to be discouraging at all, because here's the good news. We all have the ability to do this. We all have access to this. But there is an element of skill development. There is an element of training. There's an element of dedication and devotion. There's an element of alignment. There are things that we do as human beings to participate in the process. The Spirit doesn't seem to do these things very often independently of us, independently of our will, independently of our intention, independently of our faith, independently of our own spiritual development. It seems to happen in cooperation and in collaboration. So it's Spirit working through people, Spirit working with people. But even if you're not there, I want to encourage you. You are not alone. You have a spiritual team. You can begin to develop a relationship by simply, by faith, by imagining, call it pretending if you want, that these spirits, spirit guides, ancestors, animal spirits, higher self, higher power, God, are real and present, and they're there to do you good and not harm, to give you hope. Every single one of you out there, this is true about you. This is true for you. Now, as I started by saying Friday was one of the most difficult days of my life, here I am Sunday. I said Saturday I experienced probably one of the most magnificent manifestations I've ever experienced. And here I am on Sunday, and what I went through, what my family went through, has been totally reframed for me. From this is one of the worst things that could have ever happened to us, to this is exactly what needed to happen to position us to break out in the next level. This didn't happen to us or against us. This happened for us. This happened for our good. And it was being directed and guided and led by Spirit. And we were able to show the resiliency that we were able to show because we had a security blanket. We had a crutch, because we had a relationship with these things. So don't let anybody fool you. Anybody that's telling you that stuff's not real, anybody that's trying to tell you it's just a figment of the imagination, just something created by the mind, they don't know what they're talking about. And how is that helpful? And here's the proof. Can they deliver the goods? Can they help you? Does it benefit you and profit you to adopt that way of thinking and that philosophy? And if it doesn't, and if it can't, because it clearly can't, it might make you feel better, might help you through your deconstruction process. It might become a channel for your own bitterness and your own unfinished business psychologically, the shadow selves, parts of you that you haven't discovered yet, an outlet for that. It may be convenient. It may match your personal experience and the personal experience of everybody that you know. But ask this question. Does it serve? Is it helpful? Is it profitable? Is it beneficial? Is it making your life better? If the answer is yes, then by all means, continue in that path. That may be the path for you right now. That may be exactly where you need to be. But if you find yourself after deconstruction confused, and you find yourself a little bit lost, and you find yourself maybe depressed or wondering what's going to happen to me when I fall into a very tense and trying and difficult circumstance and situation in my life, and I have to face it with only myself, I want to encourage you, there's more. All right, so this is the introduction. This is the beginning. I'm going to do a whole series of these on Sunday mornings about spiritual gifts. We're going to talk about channeling. We're going to talk about prophecy. We're going to talk about spirit guides, angels. We're going to talk about manifestations. We're going to talk about all this stuff. So if you're new to the channel, or if you're not used to this kind of content, because there's a little bit of a shift for me, that's what you can expect from me going forward. So those of you that have stuck around, those of you that have watched this all the way through, bless you. Thank you so much. I appreciate and love every single one of you. And I look forward to this next year. This week, hopefully, I was going to try to have some stuff ready to announce some meetings that we're going to be doing in the coming new year, a retreat that we're going to be doing and offering. For those of you, a number of you have reached out to me that are from out of town. Aaron, if you do a retreat and do a gathering, we would come if we had enough time to make the trip. If we knew not enough time to make the trip, enough time ahead of time to know about it, that we can plan and schedule it. So we're going to be doing that. I'm going to be doing a lot more along these lines. So if you're not following me on Facebook, that's pretty much the only social media I'm really engaged in right now. I want to expand beyond that, but definitely try to reach out and connect with me on Facebook. We have New Day Global. It's a private Facebook group. Try and connect there. And we'll let you know about these upcoming events, hopefully within the next week. I'm excited about this new year. I'm excited about this journey. I'm excited about where we're going. And I want to invite you to come along with me and with us and with the community that's being built as we continue along these lines. So with that said, end of the show, podcast, live video, whatever. Again, God bless you, and hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, evening, night, morning, whatever